Welcome to Marketing Made Clear. I'm your host, Will Green. Today's episode is a bonus episode which covers my recording with my friend, the genius, I don't use that word lightly, Mr. Damian Moore. And with a bonus episode comes a bonus theme song, so I hope you're ready for that. The episode will be structured with an intro, the recording itself, and then a reflection from me at the end where I'll relate some of the conversation to other things that might be of interest to you. Are you ready? Let's go.
Marketing made clear, we're here to educate. From beginners to pros, we'll elevate. Bringing the insights like a blazing spark. Together we'll conquer, leaving our mark.
Damian Moore, or Damo as I call him, is a cloud engineer. Damo is an entrepreneur, an inventor, and an all-round genius. The reason I was so keen on getting Damo on the podcast was to discuss Audio Audit. An Audio Audit is an automated quality checking tool for podcasters that identifies common problems that you might have missed. So it makes sure that every episode is perfect each time you publish it. Damo's been involved in a number of other website developments, including Extinction Rebellion Brighton, some very complex looking software projects that have totally blown my mind, to be honest. Damo has also carried out some complex hardware projects like making a CNC machine from scratch, and even some awesome DIY projects like shoe racks and tables. I can do that one, but I can't do the rest. Damo's a saxophonist, although I don't know he has the time to play as much these days. And I'll apologise in advance for some of the audio on the interview. We recorded over Teams for this one, and I found that the platform can be a bit tricky at times when the internet connection isn't kind of at full strength. If it fluctuates, it can cut a little bit. But that's part of the learning curve for me. So after my initial interviews, I've since moved all my recording to Riverside, actually from Damo's recommendation, so we'll see how it goes on that platform. There's some chat about AI on this podcast, if you're interested in that kind of thing. I'm not really the expert on AI. I think it's the primary topic for so many podcasts out there, and you'll find podcasters that are way more knowledgeable than me on that. So, if AI is your thing, you probably might not get as much from this from me. You probably get a lot from Damo. But we talk through some of the main things relevant to AI and some concerns about the future development of content. Damo talks me through some of his work with Extinction Rebellion, and before getting on to Audio Audit, we cover some of Damo's incredible inventions, like a Wi-Fi controlled thermostat device, his own homemade CNC machine, and setting up solar panels for his home, and a bunch of stuff like that I found really cool. He's so nonchalant about it though. He's very understated, but he is an absolute dude. Damo talks about how he got into electronics, something I really wish I was better at, but I think at this point I'd just leave it to the experts like Damo. I actually make guitars and bass guitars as a bit of a hobby, and it's the electric bit that really stumps me. I'm not very good at that, so I get these kind of plug and play bits. It comes with a nice diagram, but honestly, even then I get it wrong sometimes. When we get to the topic of Audio Audit, we talk through all the features that make it a really awesome platform for podcasters. I think that this is a seriously cool platform, and with the rise of podcasting, particularly with people that might not necessarily have any training on audio editing or optimization of files or those kind of elements, it will be really useful. And it comes highly recommended from me. There are free and paid versions. Just head to audioaudit.io and have a look. You can see a live demo from Damo on the homepage. I think that the origin story of Audio Audit is really interesting, to hear how family circumstance, an interest in audiobooks, and a background in software development all colluded to inspire Damo to create the platform. I love the freedom that developing a project like Audio Audit comes with. Corporate websites tend to have a huge timeline, so it's amazing to hear the platform like Audio Audit can be put together in 3 months or so. That blows my mind again. I've said that a few times, but it honestly does blow my mind. But then it takes a developer like Damian to be able to do that. I see a huge change in how consumers expect to be interacting with content, and I think that podcasts play a huge part in this. I put this to Damo, but also cover this in the main podcast episode if you haven't checked that out already. Damo raises a great point on this interview, which is how podcasts can and will get penalised by the podcast platforms if technical aspects of their podcast aren't up to scratch. And if that scares you, please listen on, because we'll go into a lot of detail that might help you. I do cover a bit on segmentation, targeting and positioning for podcasters, but one of my favourite topics is that, and there will be a future episode on segmentation, targeting and positioning, because I think it's a really, really fundamental and important part of marketing. So Damo talks me through the checklist that Audio Audit covers, explaining what each metric means, which I think is really valuable because these are elements that will improve the quality of your podcast if you are a podcaster. Some of these elements were flagged up for me when I ran my initial podcast recordings through Audio Audit, but because these things were flagged, I was able to correct them before publishing anything. For a new podcast, I think it's brilliant in that you can help refine your episodes to set the right standard going forwards. So if you have a template in GarageBand or Logic or Pro Tools or any of those kind of DAWs, which is Digital Audio Workstation, then you can refine that template by submitting a podcast into Audio Audit and then setting the different levels until you get the right balance. Then if you can use that template whenever you record an episode, knowing that more than likely all the levels will be fine, but then you can run future episodes through Audio Audit as a checker in the way that Damo mentioned when he was talking about releasing software updates and using an automated checker. That way you can ensure that your audio quality is going to be up to scratch and you're not going to get penalised by any platforms and you're not going to blow anyone's eardrums out. So let's get on to the episode, and sorry again for some of the audio issues, but I hope you enjoy it. So I kind of wanted to start with some general background, and I did a little bit of digging on your LinkedIn profile because obviously I know you very well outside of work, and you're a cloud engineer. And I was like, okay, I think I get that. Develop stuff for cloud-based systems. Everything's cloud-based now, though. So you develop everything. Is that right?
Yeah, I do switch it around quite a bit. At the moment, it's saying cloud engineer because I'm trying to go after like certain types of contracts where I'm like doing the software architecture for companies, like so they're hosting setup and servers that like scale on demand and like scale up and scale back down and just like use all those resources efficiently, and like creating an architecture where the site is always performant and big files get sent to this place that's really cheap, but then having the database that's going to adapt. So yeah, that sort of thing. But I guess that's just one area, and I sort of tweak LinkedIn to try and get the right sort of contracts. But that's kind of separate from what I'm trying to do as an entrepreneur. I guess I would say I'm just like in general a software engineer. I'm kind of all trades and do a bit of front end, bit of back end, and adapt it to focus what sort of contracts I'm doing.
Well, I think because software engineer is so general, you get app development, you get like obviously website development. There's the whole headless CMS thing. Well, it's more than a CMS, isn't it? It's like you can base your whole company around any given platform and try and make it run every area of your business. So
yeah, I mean, I guess I should probably be even more specific if I'm saying like the exact cloud infrastructure. Like I should probably put AWS or like Terraform or like the actual languages and tools that I use probably in my.
That, like you said, you're definitely not a jack of all trades, master of none. You've mastered many trades.
I don't know about master them, but yeah, I like to know how everything works, and I enjoy learning. So if I don't know how something works, I keep taking it apart until I do. It probably seems like a waste of time on the face of it, but then a year or so down the line, when I'm trying to do something, I can then like pull out those skills and reuse them. Yeah. Like recently with this starting my own podcast and video thing, like I needed some titles. So I was like, oh yeah, I can do some like 3D rendering for that. And then just like have that as my title sequence. And I think it's good to.
I definitely relate to that, but I've got good and bad. I remember my stereo broke when I was about 14 or something, and I took it apart to try and fix it. I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be able to fix it. And I absolutely couldn't fix it. And it was like a nice stereo, and I totally spools that one up. So, but then.
Yeah, it's nicer these days when you've got a phone camera handy and you can just like take photos of like every single step and help yourself replay those. Back in the day, I definitely broke some things.
Yeah. I wanted to do a website, and I also was, getting into digital marketing, and I was kind of speaking to a lot of web developers, and not necessarily understanding everything that they were saying. And I was like, well, that's got to change. If I'm going to be the best digital marketer I can be, I need to know the language. I need to know, how websites work better. And I decided to set up my own website, which was that, I don't know if you remember WitchPet.
Yeah.
A long time ago. So I did that, and I learned so much from doing that. And even after that, I went on to study a foundation in front-end development. And, I was cool with CSS. I was cool with HTML. I was all right with, I was started to get into JavaScript and Bootstrap and stuff like that. And I just was like, at this point, I'm going to have to tap out.
Yeah. You can easily go down a rabbit hole of taking it too far, and then you forget what you're actually supposed to be doing. Like when I'm building stuff and I'm trying to be more entrepreneurial now and sort of like spin up these little projects, experiments to see if they work, kind of thing. And the engineer in me always wants to like dig into like building everything from scratch. So it's like, I need to like set up a mailing list. I better like create this database and like write all the Python code to send those emails. And I just like have to stop myself and be like, no, you just use a pre-built tool. This isn't like the core thing. You don't need to put all your attention here because you're just slowing down other things.
One thing I've been fascinated by, and I think also like I'm also a little bit, I'm fascinated, but I'm sick of this, is the discussion around AI. Like, I think I'm fascinated from the one hand. I also think we've had AI for ages. We just call it something else. What is predictive text? Predictive text is a form of AI. We've had, how long have we had that? I remember that we had predictive text on, Nokia phones 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's all relative, but I know that there's a massive impact on coding from AI, and that you can basically, I'm not going to say cut corners, but you can save a lot of time using AI. Have you seen that yourself? Or
I'd say I'm using like LLMs every day for code, and it does save so much time. Like for things like complex database queries, for example, like I know SQL, but I don't know every part of it, or like make loads of mistakes. You can spend ages reading docs, but you can just ask ChatGPT, like, I want to add this to this existing query, and it's like comes back and it works. Like
nice. Yeah.
It just saves hours and hours. But I guess it's an arms race. Everyone's doing that now, so it's like you got to keep up with it.
And I think there's a big discussion about AI for marketing. I tend to think, sometimes it's quite obvious when an AI image is being used. Sometimes it's not as obvious. So it's about a tasteful use of imagery. Then when it comes to content, it's kind of thinking of where has that content come from? AI has sourced that content from somewhere, maybe multiple sources, and kind of rewritten it for you. But unless you know that is valid information, which you can only do if you have that experience, or if you've educated yourself in some way, or it's that kind of content curation thing now. So I do think it's an opportunity and a threat at the same time. But
one of the companies I work for is Hoop, which do like events, finding an app for finding events for kids. We need to like grow and do more SEO stuff, and so we've got like a AI consultancy and that are like producing articles for us and stuff, and some of them can like attribute certain sources to what they're writing and make sure things are verified. Like they'll do a search and get the top 10 Google results and like collaborate them and that sort of stuff. So I guess it gets better, but it does raise a lot of questions, like, are we just destroying the internet? As time goes on, there's just more and more AI content, and you're feeding that into the AI, and then it can just spiral and get ridiculously worse.
That's what I worry about ending up with just loads of false information that's been regurgitated and it becomes the truth. You could source that 10 sources of the same thing, but it's still wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. I was going to ask you a little bit, because obviously you have founded Audit, and that's the main topic to discuss for this. But you've developed a bunch of different websites, including Extinction Rebellion Brighton.
Yeah, just the Brighton one. Yeah, that was like quite a big time in my life, I guess. Like I was working up in London, and Extinction Rebellion had like taken over all these bridges across London.
Yeah.
So like in my lunch break, I'd be going just like see what's going on. And back in those days, like the police were allowing people to like set up stages on the bridges, and you were hearing sort of like these scientists speaking, and like people who are like 70 years old who had just spent the last night in prison and like going through what they were doing it for and that kind of thing. There was just this groundswell really, and felt that I had to be involved in a little bit and take on building the website for the Brighton group. The main thing was like organizing all the events that were happening, so getting people together, because there's lots of these subgroups. The way that it works is like very decentralized. So there's like the meditation group, which my partner Felicity was part of, and then there was like photographers group, which I was also in. So there's lots of like these little hubs, and trying to organize them but not make it hierarchical. And then it was just like lots of really interesting challenges. So that's
I've spent a lot of my career working with companies with sustainable kind of interest, sustainable goals, and sustainability at the heart of the products. And it's something I'm really passionate about, and I definitely want to do an episode on sustainability. So maybe I could give you a shout again for that one, because I have a perspective on it which we haven't got time to go into. I think that greenwashing is really so huge, and there's so many false claims to sustainability at the moment, and there's so much, even in the field of, say, dog poo bags. There's so much misinformation out there, and I'm shocked, to be honest. And I want to do kind of I give it justice and do a proper reflection on that, because I'm shocked really with the state of affairs and what people are allowed to say. So
maybe get Felicity in on that as well, because she's
definitely
like a little app that's it's got like the eco-friendly places to live, and she's trying to like grow that out, and she knows like all about how, well, since like having our babies, like she's really into like doing the reusable nappies and all that sort of stuff. Like there's a whole industry around that.
We do that.
Oh yeah,
we do that.
All right.
Yep, all good. Yeah.
Cool.
No, definitely. And if we have to use disposable ones ever, then we use eco-responsible ones as well. The hardest thing is when you're like traveling and stuff to keep eco-friendly. But
we can't do it all the time. But
so you've done also. I mean, I was looking at some of your software projects, and it's so alien to me, I have to say. I just kind of go, wow, okay. Like, I forget that people have to do things like that, because I'm like, I can't do that.
You mean getting in depth into the actual technology of it?
Yeah, I just, I wouldn't even know where to start, I think, with some of these projects. And I remember you were developing a remote temperature control kind of thermostat kind of thing.
Yeah, for my parents. Yeah. I mean, there's lots around now, but this was, like a little Wi-Fi connected underfloor heating system. I've got like lots of lamps in our house that sort of come on and off. I've got like some solar panels, and I've like taped them to our little roof, hooked up some inverters and some lithium batteries, and it's like powering a good proportion of our home, that sort of thing.
Amazing.
I like to try and automate it and do crazy things.
That's really cool. I remember the CNC machine that you showed me that you made.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. There's lots of plans for all these things, and like 3D printing, and like I did product design in A level, and it's really cool that like you can just have this hardware in your home now, and you can just like have an idea of something to build, or if you need a certain type of bracket, you can just design it and print it or cut it.
I have to say, I am in awe of all that. That's amazing. I'm quite good at making stuff like with my hands, making guitars and stuff like that. But I'm not
following your building a bass.
Yeah, I mean, I've built like 4 now.
Oh, 4, wow.
Yeah.
Have you done any box pedals or anything like electrical with the bass stuff?
See, this is where I fall down, because I get to the end, and EMG pickups are brilliant because you just plug them into each other and they work, but you don't have to solder and stuff like that. I honestly, this is where I come a bit unstuck. So
you don't want to ruin the thing you've just built by blowing it up as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the EMGs are brilliant for that, because they just kind of have the chocolate box connectors and stuff, and they have a diagram, and I have to spend as much time doing that as making it in the first place. But yeah, it gets there.
My mum was a music teacher, but she's retired now. But I remember, I guess I must have been like age 11 and would love going into Maplin's, which is now closed, but like you get these kits, and I got this one that like an effects thing. You could like plug in a microphone and do like vocals and do echoes and like sort of reverb stuff. So that's kind of like the start of my electronics journey.
That's really cool. I really wanted to get into electronics, but it's probably a good thing that I didn't, because I wouldn't have been very good at it.
I'm sure you can be. Like there's loads of kits now where you can literally just plug in a little board and hook things together.
No, very cool. So Audio Audit, I kind of missed the boat when you founded Audio Audit. I kind of crept up and I was like, oh, wow, what's this? I don't remember you speaking about it beforehand or anything.
Okay.
So how did it all come about?
Yeah, it's been a kind of a slow burn. It's coming up to 2.5 years since I started working on it.
Yeah.
And previously I'd been like, my main personal project was like a photo management app.
Yes.
Like I was playing around with like object recognition and all these sorts of machine learning models. And I even like paid some guy in India to work on it for quite a while as well. But I kind of felt like it was too big of a project. I was kind of competing with Google Photos.
Yeah.
And never knew if I was going to actually get somewhere that was good enough quality to call it a day. So I was wanting something smaller. I've been following a lot of entrepreneur stuff like indie hackers and that sort of community getting involved, and wanted a smaller project. And we were anticipating the birth of my first daughter and getting all the house ready, doing decorating, which took days and days and days. So like chucked headphones in, listening to loads of audiobooks and podcasts, and I was surprised how many like top tier audio books would have these errors in them, like people just like repeating the title or like the chapter number, or the editors missed it. Like it's kind of understandable because there's like tens of hours going to a book recording, and they're just missing it. And then with podcasts specifically, every time it would go on to a new episode, like the volume would completely change. And I had like paint all over my hands and like wouldn't be able to touch the earbud to turn it up or down. And like sometimes really painful when it's like when you're going for a quiet one to a loud one. And you're just like, So then I was like, okay, there's like a set number of things that I can probably look out for. It doesn't seem crazy to be able to detect these sorts of things. And being a software developer, when we release software, there's like this concept of like automated tests and like quality assurance. So from the software engineering world, every time you want to release a new bit of code, you commit it and it has to pass the test suite, otherwise get alerted and it can't go live. You have to go and fix what you've done. It's like as you're building more and more features, you don't want to destroy the ones that you've already built. So it's like a safeguard against that. And it just felt to me that podcasts and audiobooks needed to have some automated quality control. Because they're all obviously very different. And it's good with podcasting because anyone can get into it, but I don't think people really want to loads of time learning it. They want to get on with it and produce, which is good. I felt like a tool that could identify those issues and then like just tell you what to focus on as the important thing. So you don't have to go learn a load of theory that's maybe wasted on you or like is irrelevant because the tools that you're using automatically do some of the stuff.
Exactly.
So that was kind of the concept. I set myself a time limit of like 3 months. So I was going to have it built and rolled out in those 3 months. This was having a newborn child as well. So it wasn't full time, but
and developing the website and everything for it as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to be able to take payments and some subscriptions, that sort of stuff.
3 months is crazy.
I mean, it's not as crazy as I'd like it to be. Like when you start following these entrepreneurs and indie hackers, they sort of like saying how they release a new product in a weekend kind of thing. It'd be cool to be able to get to that level. And I think over the time I will build up more and more of a toolkit. I can just like copy these blocks around.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the first time I had to deal with like payments or audio or...
For people that don't know, a corporate website, for instance, a timeline would usually be 6 to 9 months. And that would be without the complexity of developing the actual product, the actual. So I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I've always been most of the time I have worked in sort of small startups where there's only been like a couple of developers kind of thing. So I have got used to sort of working quite speedily on stuff. I guess my last permanent role was at a bank, and it was definitely more towards what you were describing. And
approval process is usually the biggest thing. Put forward an idea to have it approved, and then probably for them to get it approved, and
scheduling those like 4 hours of meetings a day. And
yes. This is my life. I'm used to it, but I think that's amazing. Like, firstly, to do that in 3 months and to identify your kind of position. To then, you must have had to set yourself quite a clear goal about what you're trying to achieve in that time.
Yeah, I had to be very careful not to let it spiral and just restrict what I was going to do in terms of the number of checks and keep it to a bare minimum. I feel like maybe I should have done more outreach to potential users at the start. Like, I did speak to a few people, and most of the people I speak to about it are super enthusiastic, and they're like, yes, this is something that's been missing this whole time. But then when you try and get them
to spend money
board, or getting the idea out into people's heads, because they have no idea that something can do this. And it seems like the audio industry doesn't have this concept. They think they've got their own workflow set up, and so they may be a bit hostile to changing their workflow that has like served them up until this point. So it's trying to find where exactly from like beginner to professional studios all the time, where the ideal point is for my users. Like where to find those.
I mean, I know you've got like a background in music. You're a keen saxophonist, but in music, if you're recording an album, you record that studio album. You get everything perfect, every line of every instrument that's being played. You do multiple takes until you get the take that is perfect but natural and has that feeling, as well as being, correct, notably. And then that's all recorded, all of the raw recordings are there, and then it goes to mastering. And the difference between when it's recorded and then it's mastered is massive. Mastering takes into account the overall warmth and everything of the song. There'll be like some form of compression over the whole track and things like that. Some like kind of editing software packages are better than others at really like helping you to understand that concept. For instance, like GarageBand, you don't automatically have that master track, but in Pro Tools you do. You always have that master track. So that master track is for mastering. It's for for that purpose. And I think it's not as commonly known about. So one of the things that they teach you, because I did study record production as well. One of the things that's taught to you is about, well, you need to make sure that you need to go and take that recording and go and listen to it in your car. Go and listen to it. Don't just listen to it. I've got some nice studio speakers. Everything sounds great. Go and listen to it in your car. Go and put it.
Get some
on
like
CD.
£4 4 quid earbuds from wherever and try it there.
And put it into different scenarios, because it is amazing like how suddenly somebody can't hear the vocals. And if you're doing a podcast and people can't hear what you're saying, game over. And I think what it's led me to understand is, for instance, when I'm editing a podcast, is the music has to be down very, very low to ensure that that you can hear what I'm saying. And the difficulty is that I want to integrate music into it, so it becomes very difficult. And I think it's just a big learning curve, really.
Yeah, and the frequencies of the music as well. Like, you want it to try and not overlap your voice.
Yes.
So it's like you can have a lot of bassy stuff. You can have some like hi-hats and things like that aren't going to interfere. But then the part where your voice overlaps, you kind of want to keep.
Yeah, but the really good thing for me is that is exactly like recording a band. and how you would master the guitars. The bass guitar, the drums, aren't really going to be a problem. Even to an extent, if you EQ the strings right, they're not going to be a problem. But as soon as it's the guitar, it's the high-end guitar that's going to be like kind of, and it kind of makes sense. I know going off on tangent here, sorry, but when you get guitar solo, why when there's a guitar solo do you never get singing? It's because they're occupying the same area of frequency. So I'm totally with you on that. I think it's something that people need to learn. So if you've got something, like some form of AI, some form of audio audit that can help you in any way.
I think we've just come up with another check for me to add to it.
It is, yeah. Sorry about that. Frequency, vocal frequency check.
Yeah, overlap of EQ. Yeah,
And I'd like to go on to the areas of assessment in a sec, but I kind of wanted to know about what was it actually like launching it after that 3 months?
It was good. It's a mixed response. I didn't have any experience in launching my own product or something like a big launch. So I didn't really know what to expect, but I was getting good feedback, and I did send it out to a few places that covered it. So there's a podcast called Pod News Daily. They covered it, and that brought in like a big spike of people using it. And then some other podcasts sort of like found it and featured it based off of that, and it was like randomly spike again another couple of months later. It's not taken off as much as I've wanted it to, but that's probably my lack of experience with marketing and something that I know that I need to learn more about. And I'm not a natural salesperson, but I go to conferences that are podcasting specific or audio industry specific and get feedback and get people to try it. And we also like to partner with more companies, because I think it could live in a slightly different space where other people's tools and platforms around podcast hosting and so on can like connect into it and use my internal code as an API, and that would be a more substantial revenue stream possibly. But the customers that are on it are generally happy. There's a lot of free customers that are fine. There's a lot of debate in entrepreneurship whether you should even have a free plan. I think it's good to let people try it out.
I think because for me, I've tried it, I wouldn't dream of putting an episode live without running it through the system. It just is a no-brainer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, definitely.
That means a lot. Cheers.
Oh no, definitely. I would recommend it to anyone that's starting a podcast, and within the context of what I'm trying to do and also what I see in companies. I think there's a big thing, and you will know this because you've been involved in website development. You can put a bunch of content out there, and if people don't have the time to read it or engage in it in the form that you've put it out there, they won't. And everybody talks about rich media being really important for marketing, and it is. And what I mean by that is obviously video predominantly, but audio as well. But people do have time, say on their commute, to listen to something. So, in my day job, I work with raw dog food, and there's a lot of information on our website that people read all the time, but a lot of people don't have time for that. So I see a big change in business of people moving, especially businesses moving to having a podcast, because it just makes their content more accessible. And I think that a lot of people are saying that there's a big move coming from a corporate move into doing, into making a lot more podcasts to make their content more accessible. And it might not be new content, it's just in a better form for the people that they're targeting.
Yeah, well, it gives people a lot more time with your brand. They're relaxed and doing other things that they might not want to be doing, like the washing up or something like that, where they can just like let their mind wander and take things in and digest it in a different way. It's a definitely. Good form.
Yeah, I think the balance will be how to provide the entertainment side as well.
Yeah.
That's really important.
It does take a lot of effort to create a podcast, and you could be spending so much time planning all your content and booking guests and that sort of stuff. But then there's something on your technical side which is penalizing you, and you're not getting the reach that it deserves for Apple or Spotify or whatever, and you just don't know what that is. Like, you could be attributing it to all sorts of things.
And did you have like a target audience in mind when you launched?
Yeah, it's kind of moved around a bit. I initially saw audio books as being the primary usage, but because they are so long and you need to, like, there seemed to be a longer need because of just the length of the audio. But then I realized there are kind of only a couple of audiobook publishers, and I thought I was putting my eggs all into one or two baskets. And podcasting seemed to be like it had a lot of the other issues, and there was a lot of sort of lower hanging fruit because of just the range and quality. And I was always targeting people who are, comfortable doing their podcast, but wanted to improve the quality, with also an eye on, imagining it being used in a studio and helping, like, in a big workflow, someone who's maybe a manager at a studio, that kind of thing, or someone who's outsourcing a lot of the editing and just wants to have an overview of everything that's being worked on, and like if one of the shows drops a bit, like where to put the attention more. No one exact pinpoint audience.
You may know this. There's always the process of selecting your target audience, segmenting that audience, or just picking a segment that you're going after and positioning yourself for them, and then targeting them. So obviously, clearly position yourself for those people. And I think targeting is really difficult for this, because if you think about targeting, you're usually thinking about, well, what kind of things are they listening to? What kind of media do they engage with? What Facebook groups are they on, and all that kind of stuff. And it's a lot harder. It's a very specific segment, but it's very hard to target, I think.
Yeah, and even if people are producing a podcast, there's so many different areas that they might be focusing on. They might be just focusing on the guests that they have on the show. Or, like, for a lot of people, to them, the audio sounds fine, and they're not really concerned with looking anywhere else, or they think that anything else is going to be too costly and not for them. It's good to have a target, but it's also good to be flexible with it and see new opportunities and how it can connect into what people are doing and be reused in other ways.
Oh, cool. Well, I'd quite like to go into, if it's all right with you, what would you call them? Areas of assessment?
Yeah, checklist or...
Yeah, that sounds better. Let's call it a checklist. So I'd quite like to go into the checklist. Yeah, kind of before we go into each one, how did you come up with this list? This priority list?
It was mainly through what I was hearing in what I was listening to. I listened to so many podcasts, like I'd never be able to get through them all, but it's like every time I hear something that sounds a bit off, whether it's like a word that's being clipped off or something that's where the music comes in and it's super loud or anything like that, I have like a document where I just add it in as a list, and over time I just occasionally go through that list and see what the most common ones are and what ones I'm able to like automatically create a check for.
Okay. Yeah.
And then also, like, I've read through the standards that Apple produce where they say like exactly what the loudness level should be within and peak volumes, that sort of stuff. There's also standards from the audio book industry, ACX, which is to do with like spacing, like gaps of silence, which I think are just also transfer nicely into the podcast world as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because it's really difficult when you're planning a podcast, and there's certain things which I will come on to as we go through it that I just didn't think about. It's interesting because I think about metadata because I'm from a SEO background, not just part of my work has been in SEO. So metadata for me was really important. I know from YouTube that people do great videos and then they don't get that bit right, so they can get like really easily penalized on that side. But I guess what you're saying is on these various platforms, the podcast will get penalized for not doing certain things or not being, for the loudness or the silences or something like that. But you wouldn't know.
I mean, they do publish the standards of what they want, but they've got other tools they're using to automatically sort of figure out what the good quality podcasts are, and they sort of build up a metric of every show really, and just use that to influence their sharing and things like that. But I think, metadata is good. I think you always want to have someone be able to find, like if they just pick up an MP3 file of your show somewhere, you always want it to be like including your name and the podcast and like artwork and stuff like that, so that they can find their way back to it and see where it came from. And then transcriptions as well, I think is really important, because that's going to be, AI has made that so much easier that you can just get a transcript of your show and attach that to your podcast, and that's going to bring in so many new listeners who are looking for that exact thing that you're talking about. Like it might just be like you've randomly mentioned a product name or like a brand or something, and then that's going to cause it to be picked up by someone else. Like there's a new tool that's being built by an entrepreneur I follow, and I think it's called Podscan, and his entire business is that marketers working for a company want to know when people have talked about their brand. He's basically got like search alerts. Every single podcast that comes in, his transcription will run over it and identify the keywords and tell whoever it is that's looking for them. And so like that is going to bring your show to different people.
Like Google alerts you can set up, but obviously that's all text based. And when it comes to metadata, that also the text has to be in certain areas, like an H2 tag or something, on the website. It's not just usually picking that up from just any mention. That's a really interesting one. Do you know, just a side note, do you know the earliest use of metadata?
No.
It's a spoiler for a future podcast.
Okay.
The Great Library of Alexandria.
Okay.
Yeah. Earliest use.
What's the metadata from that then?
So what they used to do is the ships would come in and they'd make copies of all their documents, and then they would put them into the library, and they developed a tag that had certain information on each of the scrolls, because it wasn't really books at that point. So they could then sort all of the documents that they had with this tag on the end. So they didn't have to open the document out to see what it was. The document would have a certain level of information, which we would understand now from books, like the title, the author, the year. So there you go. Nice. You learn something every day.
ID tags for scrolls.
Yeah, exactly. So first thing, obviously, on the areas that we're going to talk through. So metadata tags, really important. And you analyze that as the first port of call. Yeah. So that, I think that's kind of self-explanatory, that one. I like to think.
Yeah, it's quite a simple check.
Yeah. It's like SEO, really. Yeah. Getting keywords in there. Yeah. If you've got a podcast about something in particular, if you've got an episode about something in particular, get the keywords into there. That's really important. And then cover image. So is that for optimization of the image?
Yeah. So this can be slightly confusing because people think they've put their cover image on their podcast feed, like the RSS feed has the image, and that's what shows up when you search in a podcast player. But you can actually embed it in the audio file as well, and that will display as an artwork for a particular episode. And then it's also useful to have, like, if someone just shares the actual audio file rather than the feed, then at least it looks nice. Or if you play it on the desktop or something like that. But another reason that I actually added this was because I noticed a big podcast, like from The Guardian, they'd embedded their cover image, but it was like 25% of the actual audio file. Like their image was massive, over 5 megabyte image that they put in, and obviously that's a big waste of space, and it's affecting download and the cost of the downloads, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I know for certain podcasts, anything for digital is usually 72 dpi, and they're usually 1,000 by 1,000 pixels, or some of the bigger ones need to be 3,000 by 3,000. So even the 3,000 by 3,000 shouldn't be anywhere near like that kind of file size. So
it depends like what compression you use. I think they had like a PNG rather than you want it to be just a JPEG that's quite well compressed. But the check will tell you if it's too big.
So the next thing is chapters.
Yeah, you see it a lot on YouTube videos, like it comes up in the little player, but also most podcast players as well will have chapters that you can skip through to. It's nice for the listener because they can skip through the adverts, but maybe that's not so so nice for the creators.
No, definitely. I mean, funny you say about some of the experiences you've had with audiobooks, because I've listened to a lot of George Orwell, one of my, if not my favourite author, George Orwell. I've been listening to the podcasts on Spotify, and they're all just broken into like 80 different episodes. No podcast, no, you don't know where you are. Sorry, no chapters, nothing. It's just the next one, and inevitably you lose your place, and it's a nightmare to try and find where you are.
You can use AI for this as well. Like if you can't be bothered to do it all exactly, one idea is to just take the transcript. So from Audio Audit, it'll give you like a subtitle file, paste that into ChatGPT and say like, summarize this into the main chapters. It'll just give you times and chapters. You can just use that. Things like that. These large language models are quite good time savers for little things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe something I need to do. Because I've got a few.
It depends how long.
Yeah,
how long they are. Yeah,
I think mine are looking like 40 minutes to an hour. So we'll see. Well, we'll see how long they end up. It depends on the topic. I think I do have more some favorite topics and some not so much. So bitrate.
Yeah,
that's a very technical one. So what is bitrate?
This is basically how compressed it's going to be. When you generate your MP3 file from it, you're going to specify how compressed you want it to try and make it. So back like in the day of early little MP3 players that before we had smartphones and stuff, you might be listening to stuff on like 64 kilobits, and that would be because you've only got a few 100 megabytes on this little device.
I remember that well.
But typically like you want 128 bits or 256 kilobits to sound good in the modern day and age, especially if you've got background music and stuff.
Just to make it completely clear, the higher the bit rate, the bigger the file. And the longer the download. Yeah, so it's all about compression. Is all about making compression of files.
There's two types of compression.
Of audio. Yeah, that's a different thing. Compression when it comes to files is about making files smaller. Yeah. At the end of the day.
Yeah. And you can think of it like in a visual way. You can tell when an image has been compressed and it like you've got a JPEG and it sort of goes all blocky or
pixelates.
Yeah.
So you can definitely, that's a good analysis. Number of channels.
Yeah, this one's a bit controversial. A lot of people prefer mono for podcasts. A lot of people say stereo. I'm kind of more in the stereo camp. It's mainly to highlight it in case you haven't realized, because if you want to do nice musical interludes like you enjoy, someone's made the effort to produce that music and make it stereo and like more immersive and things like that. So when you do get those musical parts, you'll feel it's a lot more rich. But also I think it's got benefits if you're just having a conversation. So people who are sound engineers that I've listened to on this topic will suggest you pan the different people slightly to the left or the right. Definitely. So like you don't want to do it fully all the way to the left and the right, because then if someone's listening with just one earbud in or they have hearing loss in one ear, then they can't pick up the conversation. But something like a 10% pan either way,
60-40.
It can make just the conversation a bit more intelligible. Like you can sort of visualize more who is speaking at one time.
Yeah, and stereo goes right back to the 1960s, so it's not like something new. I think we know it sounds richer to listen to stuff in stereo. I think when you put reverbs on audio, stereo reverbs sound better, give it a richer feel. If it's all panned dead center as well, it is difficult. It doesn't have any like kind of spatial atmosphere when you listen to it. Yeah. But like you said, if people are walking around with one earphone, that's when if you hard pan, you're going to just not hear it.
Yeah. And if you're using quite a lot of the AI tools that sort of doing AI mastering, you might not notice, but a lot of them do bring it down to just mono. Like a lot of tools do assume mono for podcasts, which you might want.
Yeah,
it's good to know.
Well, you can always make something stereo mono, but you can't make something mono stereo unless you're adding an effect or something. You can't.
Yeah, or you're trying to use some sort of generative AI. But
yeah, true. Yeah,
it's never going to sound as good.
AI strikes again.
I don't know if that is a thing, but I'm just imagining it would be.
Maybe. Someone will do it. You should do it before someone else does. So that was number of channels. So sample rate.
Yeah. So sample rate is you've got an analog signal coming in to your microphone, and it's got to be measured like several times a second to build it up into the waveform. So the sample rate is just how many times it is measuring. And this is going to be like tens of thousands of times a second. Like it's common, it's like 48,000 times a second. It will just be seeing where the microphone, like the waves of your voice, how it's going to convert that. And likewise with the last one, like you can go one way, but you can't really go back the other way. So if you've recorded on your phone and it's only 20 kilohertz or something, you're not going to get it back to CD quality or above.
Again, with a picture, if it's pixelated, you can't improve the quality. Well, AI, usually, without AI, you can't improve the quality.
Yeah, and in the case of AI, it's not really the original image anymore. It's synthesizing it and
it's predicting what the image should look like.
Yeah.
I mean,
odd outcomes.
Oh yes, extra hands and stuff like that. I think with sample rate, that's one that's used in the music industry a lot. And when you get a weird low sample rate, it's actually kind of used as an effect sometimes. You get that very robotic sound, that very kind of, it's almost like croaky and robotic. It's used in the Matrix for a lot of the soundtracks and stuff like that.
Yeah. And think of like if you're speaking to someone on a mobile phone or something, like that's a very low bit rate and a low sample rate. I'm
going to guess sample width is frequencies. Is it the range of frequencies?
Sample width, no, it's also known as bit depth. There's duplicate terms for a lot of these, and sample width is also known as bit depth or sample size. So it's related to what we were just talking about with sample rate. If you think of the sample rate being how many times it's measuring per second, the sample width is how many increments you've got with each of those. So it's the resolution in the other dimension. So like as the wave goes higher, you're counting up, and when it goes down, and it's just like the number of steps you can count.
Yeah. So, stupid example. Again, if you were drawing a graph, then the sample rate would be across the horizontal axis, and it would be how many times a second that measures it at that point, and the vertical axis would be the how many points at which you could measure it across that axis. Yeah, I sound so stupid. Sorry, but
no, that's. I think that's clear. Well, it might not be clear to other people, but I think that's right.
That's marketing made clear for you to make it less clear.
Because we're basically taking an analog signal, which is just like a smooth wave, and we're having to convert it to digital. So we have to choose how often we're going to sample it in that way and how many integer values we give it in the other dimension.
Exactly, yeah, because digital, it always likes to be straight lines, usually. Unless AI is involved.
And fixed numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
Discrete numbers. Yeah.
Okay, and then the next thing was loudness. And when I uploaded my first episode, this was actually a major issue for me. So my average volume was apparently too low on the episode. So that would have meant that people listening to that episode, if I had uploaded it as it was then, and obviously I've used the platform to then correct it, re-upload it, and make sure that everything's correct before I publish them. So people would have had to turn their volume up, and then on the next, if there was an advert in there or the next episode, they'd get absolutely blasted in their ears. So not cool. So that was a major one for me.
Yeah, it's something where if you don't explicitly set it when you export your file, it's probably going to set it to some default that's tuned to some other industry. Like different industries have their different desired loudness levels. So for YouTube, it'll be something higher. For TV or film, it's going to be a lot lower, because for a film, you've got it's a slower pace and you've not got as much things happening. Like a lot of the time it'll be conversation or like background music. And so it's annoying that all the platforms have kind of got their different levels, but for podcasting, there's the set level plus minus 1 decibel either way that they want it in. And that keeps things consistent. And there's been like several of these measures. There's root mean squared and things in the past, but this is kind of the standard that people have come up with as being more how humans perceive loudness. It's a good measure.
Yeah. No, I mean, this was really important for me because, again, I don't want to get that wrong. And it couples with the next one, which is peak volume as well, where I had another issue. So my episode got a little bit loud in places. And actually, you can see this really well if you export your file as a WAV file, and you can literally have a look, especially if you've got musical background bits on your episode. You can really see that. And you see the wave kind of filling the bar. And again, that's kind of peak volume. Worst thing is when you get clipping and, you can see basically what looks like solid color on your WAV file.
Yeah, it just sort of goes flat at the top and the bottom, and your speakers can't go any louder, and it just sounds a bit awful.
Yeah, and then you can get into stuff like when you're talking about waves, aliasing and anti-aliasing and all that kind of stuff. But that's probably a bit complex.
Yeah, I don't have many checks for that specifically, because it mainly comes down to how good your sample rate and sample width are. As long as those are in good bounds, then the digital to analog converter will usually do a good job when it's been played. Then
noise floor.
Yeah.
What's that one?
I guess the best way to think of it is that no analog circuitry is perfect. Like, we've got our microphones and they have to handle a lot of differences in volume. Like, they want to work if you're just talking quietly, you're whispering into it, but they also need to work if you're shouting into it. And so that's quite a loud range. And so they've had to make compromises when they make any microphone of just sort of what level they set it to. And then there's always going to be like an electrical noise that you can't get rid of, and that's just a higher quality microphone will have less of this noise, and a lower one will have more of it's sort of like a static background static sound. You can use a lot of filters to get rid of this, like noise gates, and they will make sure when you've stopped talking it brings the hiss down to absolute zero. But it's always better to have less noise in the original recording, because the hiss is still going to be in your voice somewhat. That exactly. It's
the same thing about taking a photo where the sun's shining into the lens or something. Yes, you can correct it, but then it's better just get it right in the first place.
Yeah. If we're using like an image analogy, it would be sort of like if you zoom into a photo, it's like sort of speckled, and you can see like the actual pixels of the photo are quite different from.
Yeah. No, this is
blue sky would be.
Oh yeah,
sort of speckly. Yeah,
this is definitely a music-based one for me, because when you're recording and you're just making sure that you don't have any hum from microphones, and if you're recording an amplifier with valves in it, that is going to hum. You're always going to get that hum, and then trying to remove that after you've recorded it's just a nightmare. Yeah, especially when you're using non-digital limiters and stuff as well. That's tricky. Anyway. Totally different thing. Then what is quiet channel? It's going to be quite rare that you're going to come up against it, but say you did have a file that was in stereo, but in parts of it you hadn't used both of those stereo tracks and it was just coming out one ear. That's just sort of picking up. It's more like it was easy for me to add the check for. Definitely. It's very rare. I'll tell you how that could happen, though, because if you recorded everything and then you put a master track in and on whatever digital station you're using, you could quite easily pan everything to one side, or master everything as mono, and then sometimes things revert to just being on the left-hand side and not on the right-hand side as well. So it's a great check, because you could easily make that mistake. It's an editing mistake that could happen. So it gets my vote. Good to be there and boost your score. Give you some confidence in your results. I'm fighting the quiet channels corner here. I love it. And then, so this next one is another issue for me. And this is something I didn't even know about. Silence at the beginning. So I didn't have any silence at the beginning. If you don't have enough silence at the start, then you can get clipping. And you recommend, or on the platform it recommends between 0.5 seconds and 1 second for initiation. So just to stop the clipping that might happen when the next episode starts.
Yeah. So this is probably one that a lot of podcasts don't know about, and is probably not too major, too much of a problem. But this comes out of the audiobook industry standards, and I guess we can talk about the silence at the end as well, because they're pretty much the same check.
Yes.
They recommend having at the start and the end just a little bit of breathing room, just to decompress slightly and realize you're going into a different podcast. But also sometimes if you're using sort of cheap Bluetooth headphones or something, they might take half a second or something to actually power on, because they've been in a power saving mode. And you might not hear the first bit of the first word, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think that's a really good one. It's changed the way I've edited, so I'll definitely take that one on board. So the next one's restarted sentences is something that I worry about in terms of mistakes while I'm editing, because sometimes I'm not perfect. I'm re-recording a lot of the stuff that I say because I either don't like the emphasis of how I've put it or whatever. So I'll restart it. And then when you're looking at editing a huge episode, and you're cutting and you're putting everything, it's something that I would worry about, and it's a mistake I could easily make. So, and I guess that works off the transcription.
Yeah, I noticed this more in the audiobooks that I was listening to, but I think it does apply quite well to podcasts as well. In this conversation we've just had, there's been periods where I've sort of spoken over your question, and it's good to re-record it sometimes, or repeat it, and you don't want those to slip back in. It's also kind of fuzzy as well, so you don't have to say the exact same thing. It will just work out within a certain period of time. You sort of said 60% of the words were sort of the same in a similar order. Sometimes it does falsely pick things up, if one person says and then the other person says that counts as a repeat. But
you can always ignore what's been raised, but it's better to have it raised than not.
It only takes a couple of seconds to click it and see.
And then finally, and this is a debate I think as well to have after this, is profanities and swearing. I think this really applies to if you're uploading your episode as being not explicit, because in most podcasts you say whether it's explicit or not. So you can tag
your audience age and so on, and especially for YouTube, there's definitely toggles there where you have to say who it's suitable for. This was a fun one to write, creating the list of words. And, downloaded some funny lists, and then added my own sort of British swear words to the list.
Oh, amazing. Firstly, that brings the list to a close, but I do want to talk about profanities and swearing, because I think it's an area of discussion, and it's something I've pondered about quite a lot, to be honest, because I don't swear a lot when I'm working, at work, when I'm being professional and everything. With friends, obviously, as you will know, I do swear quite a lot. I'm quite sweary. Then when it comes to the podcast, it's really difficult to know where to place it, because there's an intimacy with the podcast that you're speaking to somebody. So I want to be myself. But then I don't want to put people off listening to the podcast with an explicit warning or to say that there's swearing in it. So I have decided that I won't change what's being said, but I'll just change the way it's being said, so that the swearing will be bleeped out, but in kind of funny ways rather than putting a bleep. I'll just do something, because I think it will help me be more natural. But I have had a lot of conversations about it. I don't know what your thoughts are about swearing in podcasts.
I'm torn as well. I think it does sound a lot more natural, and obviously I don't mind at all hearing it. But I guess you never know, if it's going to be played in a car with someone who's got kids, or there has to be some sort of restrictions. I don't know what the numbers are. I don't have any stats on what percentage it reduces your listenership to, or anything like that. I guess it wouldn't affect it too much.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I think it's a really debatable one. And I've spoken to different people and had very, very different opinions on this. My thought is that, if I can edit it so that it keeps that kind of authenticity and doesn't limit the podcast, but I can also not then have to limit it by making it an explicit podcast, I think that's the best kind of balance.
Yeah. And you want to be able to reuse your content. Once you created it, you want to be able to like post snippets of it to LinkedIn or wherever. And you don't want, like, the worst thing would be if you had like a post that was going viral and then it just gets removed because it's
got swearing.
Yeah.
So that's really quite a good analysis of everything on Audio Audit. What I would say is, we did talk about this, but once it had gone through all those checks and I got to the bottom of the summary, I then saw the transcription and I was very, very happy with that.
That's good.
I thought that was just a nice added bonus, really.
Yeah, it was a byproduct of creating the restarted sentences and the swearing detection. But I think it's really useful to have it, and you can download it as like a subtitle file, which you can then just like attach to your YouTube video when you upload it. There's podcast 2.0 standards where transcriptions are included, and if you've got a website for your podcast, whack it on there as well, because it means Google's gonna find it. Like it gives you more free content. It's quite a lot of processing. It's caused me to build like this big infrastructure where if someone uploads a file, I have to spin up like loads of these machines to do all of that stuff. Okay. And then they all turn off again when it's finished to save money. But yeah.
I think it's brilliant, honestly, and I definitely take my hat off to you. What a cool project. Come at a time where it's particularly useful for me as well. So it's awesome. No, thank you.
Serendipitous.
Yeah, I love it. I did have a couple of quick fire questions. So first thing is a general question. Do you have any kind of advice for me starting and growing a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak with lots of authority because like I know it from a technical angle, but me myself, I'm still only getting used to actually releasing my own podcast. But from what I see, like, I think setting up a good schedule is important and being consistent about it. I'd say don't leave your artwork as something that's sort of left to the last minute. You kind of want it to be, well, it is your brand and you need it to stand out in different scenarios. So like in a podcast player, like where you've got a list that you're scrolling through, they can be very small. So kind of keep the text that's readable. And then I'd say repurpose stuff as much as possible. I don't know if you're recording the video as well for this, but I found that when I put my first episode on like LinkedIn and YouTube as well, like it was getting much more interaction and views because I think it just sort of stands out compared to just a static post. Like people are sort of engaged by video. If you've got only audio, what you can do is create these audiograms. There's tools like Headliner, and they'll basically take a snippet of your audio and make it more visual. So they normally make like a square video, and then there'll be like a waveform bouncing when you're speaking, and like the presenter's heads and that sort of stuff. I think that kind of works well for social.
Oh, cool! Yeah,
I'd say give it enough time to succeed. I did a little bit of checking of stats, and apparently 44% of podcasts stop within 3 episodes. So that's something to bear in mind. I think you kind of have to make it into a little bit of a habit, form a habit around it, and sort of target maybe 50 or 100 episodes, and like be comfortable with there not being many listeners for that, because like there's a big lag between the audience growing and you producing it. So I think it's something that sort of compounds over time and you have to keep going. Yeah. But if people are searching later on down the line and they're searching for a particular topic and you've got show notes and transcriptions and stuff, like they're going to come and it's going to grow later. I'd also say don't worry about how long it takes in like the first few. Like you've probably got more under your belt than I have, but I'm hoping the workflow optimizes over time and you sort of get used to it and get into a quicker routine of it. And
I'm getting better at speaking.
Okay. Yeah. I think I might be. I'm not sure.
Well, sometimes I think I am, and then I get to bits where I'm like, why can't I say that word?
And also like how you editing, because quite a revelation to me has been these tools where you edit as text. Descript is like a big, well, probably the biggest one in this area, but also like Riverside. So what you do with that is you upload your audio to it or open it in there. It also gives you a transcript, but then you are editing the audio just like you're moving text around in a word processor.
No way.
Yeah, and it can remove like all the little filler ums and ahs and stuff. I found that to be a massive time saver.
Wow. Okay. That's
so
awesome. Yeah. I am going to check that out. I haven't checked that out yet.
Especially if you've got guests like me that go all over the place and you want to make it into some sort of more of a structure.
I've heard of Riverside, but I've never used it. So I just thought it was another editing platform.
Yeah, I've not used it. I've used Descript for my one. It was good. I mean, it could be better. It was a bit glitchy and stuff, but
I'm old school.
I still had to do editing after it. That was just sort of like a first rough edit. And then
that would be perfect. That would be perfect. That would be so useful.
It's just to get it all down when you've got like a massive audio that you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad I asked this question.
I'm still learning. I don't know.
No, that's really cool. Thank you. I have been looking into, what platforms to go on. I think I've got another podcast that I've got, and it's just on Spotify. It's been the easiest one to kind of upload to. And we did look at going on to Apple as well. And there was a lot more involved with getting it up onto Apple. And it kind of couples with a second question that I've got, which is it best to use an RSS feed or use native platforms? So if I was to be a good host and combine those questions into one, it would be, how would you kind of approach getting a podcast published? Would you just focus on a couple and do that natively, or would you go down the RSS route? I
would say RSS is what you want to be focusing on here. So Spotify, obviously it gives you your podcast page and stuff, but you don't have to use that. The main thing that you're getting from them is the hosting of the audio and that RSS feed. All you should have to do then is give that RSS feed to the other distribution platforms.
Platforms.
And then the beauty of podcasting is that it's like an open standard for getting these updates. So you shouldn't ever have to touch Apple or any of the others. When you release a new episode, they'll check every hour or every few hours and just add it in when it updates. I would say Apple's important because they are probably the definitive source. Like, they have quite an open API. So like I use a really obscure podcast app called AntennaPod. When I search for a podcast in there, that's using Apple's API. And I think so many of them do use that as the source of truth. There's also podcastindex.org. That's probably another useful one to do. And maybe Overcast and Pocket Casts. I've not been through the process, so I don't know how hard it is. As I see it, you should just have to submit the URL. Like, you might have to you might have to sign up for an account and prove your email, but you shouldn't have to touch it again after that.
It was one of those things where I felt like RSS was the way to go, but it was just a case of being time poor. It's kind of like, okay, it's on Spotify, using the kind of native upload and all that kind of stuff. But when you think about it, if you're doing that on an RSS feed, whether it's using Spotify as the kind of source or whether using another kind of third party one, you're doing all that, and you might as well try and make it work across multiple platforms. It's just the setup, I guess.
Yeah, I've not been through the process for Apple. Yeah, they normally make you link it to an Apple ID. And then that means you have to have a iPhone and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know how involved it would be, but it should be a one-time thing.
I set up an Apple ID, which I'd reckon must be about my 10th Apple ID that I've ever set up.
So I've only had like an Apple device in the last year, just because I've had to build apps and stuff for clients.
Yeah.
But I get annoyed when I have to use it because it's like in a drawer somewhere at home. And I'm out at the library or somewhere and I can't get it.
I'm currently on a MacBook Pro with my 2 iPhones sat behind me and my iPad and my iMac over there. And yeah, so
they're always in reach.
They've got me. It's a bit of a scary thing when you're going to do it. And it can be, you put all that effort into making a podcast, you might as well try and get it out to as many places as possible.
Yeah, I'm speaking from a position where I haven't gone through the effort of actually doing it myself.
And I'm speaking from a position where I got halfway, I was like, I can't be asked for this. I'm just going to be on Spotify. But I will do it for Marketing Made Clear because I need to do things right.
Yeah, I feel like I wouldn't be able to find it. Like if I wanted to search it in my podcast app, it wouldn't find it. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, what do you mean Marketing Made Clear?
If it's just on Spotify, I don't think I would be able to find it on the player that I use. No,
you wouldn't be. So I will rectify that. But Marketing Made Clear, not yet published. So there you go. Just wait. It'll take over the world. So I guess the next bit about monetizing podcasts. And that's one of those things where I don't mind adverts in podcasts. I get how that has that relationship to support the podcast by there being adverts in it. And you tend to hear, adverts on the native platform, or you get adverts in the actual podcast, or you can get a sponsorship or something.
Like a host-read advert.
I don't particularly have a preference. Do you have a preference? Or
the studies say that host-read adverts perform better and can be more financially beneficial. But I think you need to get to a certain stage, a certain listenership to get those kinds of sponsors. A couple of other things that I was thinking was, if you don't need the revenue to survive, I would say don't focus on advertising at the start. Like it's a lot better to make your show good and get a really engaged audience.
Yeah.
There's ways that people can support your show: Patreon, Ko-fi, Buy Me a Coffee, if you've got like a core audience that is wanting to support you. But there are lots of publishing platforms, I think like Buzzsprout, they have something where you can just literally turn on ads and it will automatically put them in the start and the end and also intersperse them automatically. So that, I guess, is a very useful and simple way of dipping your toe in the water. If you just sort of want to get an idea of how much you could make, find something that does it automatically. I wouldn't spend a lot of time on it to start with.
It's focused on the wrong thing early doors, probably.
It depends what you're trying to do. If it's a massive budget podcast and it's for Sky or something and it needs to pay its way and be worth the investment, then obviously you've got to do that. But you're going to have teams presumably that can build those relationships.
And it's probably hosted by somebody that already draws their audience. So
one thing that I am quite interested in is Sam Harris. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
He does like a philosophy podcast, and that's quite a unique model where he's got like a public and a private feed. The public one has tasters of conversations, so it'll be less frequent, but there'll be like the first hour of a conversation, and then it will sort of fade out and say like you need to subscribe to hear the full episode. Things like that. That could be a way of where you're giving people extra if they want to hear more, just charge for that bit.
That's really interesting.
And the way you do that technically is you have like a second RSS URL that's got basically a username and password embedded in it, and you give that to them and they paste that into their player.
I guess the other one I've heard is that people delay publishing their podcasts on certain platforms, and then they have their own platform maybe that you subscribe to, or you pay per play or something, and you get that episode a bit earlier.
Yeah, you could hide some of your content in like a Patreon paywall.
Yeah. I know the podcast The Rest Is History do that. So they hook you in with a 7-part story about the Aztecs. And if you want to know the next bit, you have to get on there. Unless you're me and you're listening about 2 years after it's all been published, and you're just like, I'm just listening to all of it now.
To get advanced copies of the show. That's a good idea.
But we touched on it a bit about editing, but do you have any thoughts on like what to edit on or what to avoid editing on?
I'm experimenting a bit myself. going all around the different tools. I would say try things that you think are going to be helpful, but the more important things I would say are to understand getting your recording and mastering set up, like sample rate and sample width that we spoke of, and how to use a few filters and what they're going to do. So your noise gate, your compressor, your normalization, and EQ if you want to enhance the sound, the tone a bit more. And then if you can pick whatever tool and search for like tutorials on how to do each of those in each one. Free ones like Audacity are good. Like you can get decent results out of that.
If you're an Apple user, you get GarageBand for free. There you go.
Yeah. I think that's good as well. Reaper, I'm trying out. They have like a free trial. I think the things you get for a more expensive professional DAW like that is, compared to Audacity anyway, is the non-destructive editing. So later on, you can then go and tweak your effects, and it's not all like burn the effect down. Like Audacity, if you change the loudness, it's like performing that operation, and then if you do it again, it's like basing that on the last thing you do, and you're sort of making it worse. So non-destructive's good. Like you can build a good workflow of several different tools. Like there's a lot of online ones now, but just be careful the format they're exporting in, because if you're getting like an MP3 out of it and then you're bunging that into a next tool in your chain, then it's like it's decompressing it and it's compressing it again, and you're just adding compression artifacts on top of each other. So always try and get WAV file output of it, and then continue on from there.
No, for sure. I think and the other thing, a little tip that I have found is whatever DAW you're using, and for people that don't know what that is, DAW, Digital Audio Workstation. So that we're talking about, Pro Tools, Logic at the top level, and then anything else from there. GarageBand we talked about. And if you set yourself up a bit of a template, so when you edit your first episode, as long as you're using the same microphone and all the same tools, I use lots of different channels because I have a channel that has echo on it. I drop my mate, my kind of AI assistant voice. It's just text to speech generator. And I put those into those because I know they're all like the right levels. And so I then save that, delete it all out of it, and I then have that as a template to use. I have the intro in it, I have the outro in it, and I know that everything's set right. So all I have to do is just move it around. It saves a lot of time.
So hopefully like the stuff that Audio Audit's giving you up front now is like the stuff that you're not going to have to worry about later on. It's just going to help you build your template, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then instead of Audio Audit changing the way I do things, Audio Audit becomes part of the workflow before I publish anything, so that I can just kind of run it as a checking, like we talked about at the beginning, about just a form of checking rather than trying to refine how I'm doing things at the moment. So
insurance,
I was going to ask about microphones. I've got a nice microphone from my music days. You can kind of spend as much as you like on a microphone, but I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that.
I'd say it doesn't need to break the bank. I've got the Audio Technica ATR 2100X, and it was 80 quid new. You can get them secondhand for a lot cheaper. And I think like you just don't want to be using like the microphone on your laptop or your phone or your earbuds. If you don't have like audio interfaces and stuff, something like this is good because it's like doing all the processing inside, and you just got a USB digital signal out, so you don't have to worry about the sound card introducing noise or anything like that. I actually use it on my phone sometimes. Like if I'm doing a video intro, I actually just connect it to my phone because I know that it's better than connecting it to the SLR camera. And as long as I've set up the recording app to record in WAV and the right bit rate and so on, sample rate, then it's going to be sort of like as good as it gets. And that sort of helps if you do want to be like out and about recording.
Definitely. But I think that being said, if you buy, a £10 microphone, it's not going to, you're going to get a £10 microphone type of sound.
Yeah. I'd say you want to go above like what you're going to get in PC world that's like designed for just being like on video calls, like a lot of those will have automatic gain, and it's going to sort of like start messing around with your signal.
Yeah.
Not like it's trying to block out people talking in the background, or like it's going to be very directional, or it's worth just going the step above and using something that's from like a proper audio engineering company.
See, I'm very lucky. I've got a MXL 990. I spent my student loan on that back when I was at university, and I've kept it in a box, pristine. Yeah, so I use that when I'm recording the actual like full podcast. It's not something I want to be taking around different places and using if I'm recording a podcast on the go. So I've got a different setup for that. But
is it a condenser or dynamic?
Condenser. Yeah.
Okay, because maybe that's something that's interesting to know. So like a condenser will pick up all of the surroundings, right? So you have to be in a quiet, sort of well-treated room. Yeah,
which this is.
I can sort of see stripes behind you.
I treated my kind of surrounding. I've got the kind of the foam treatments, which are pretty useless most of the time, but they just kind of take away some of the harshness. So you might be able to see some foam here. This is great for a podcast, by the way, describing things, but let me describe
these. That's nice little marketing made clear on the wall.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
is that laser cut?
That's when I start doing videos. The area immediately around where I'm speaking is all covered in this foam, and that's all it will do. It will dampen stuff. It's not soundproofing, or it's not acoustic engineering in the slightest. It just really just dampens the area a little bit. I've got all my speakers on sponge as well, because then that helps to stop any transmission of any kind of or any buzzes through from the speakers around to any microphones. So I've got the pop cap that just stops any spitty S's and de-esses it a little bit. But this microphone's also in a cradle, so that will stop any kind of vibrations from the stand as well. And it's very directional. So I'm always very careful about my spacing. And what I try and do is have the pop cap, which helps me for that, because I know that the distance from that microphone to that needs to be the same as my face to that. So then it just helps with positioning. And then what I've been
wondering if I need a pop cap. I just went with like one of these foam covers, which I gathered is similar.
What the idea is there is that it's all about stopping like your breath from passing over the microphone membrane
capsule. Yeah. Because
that will create the kind of wind sound, and it's really loud for the microphone to pick up. Yeah. There's no real way for the microphone to not be affected by that. So you have to physically stop that from happening. And that's what this does, is the best way for that to happen. For an actual, like what you've got, you can still, if you were to blow against it, you would still get air through. So that's why you kind of need that disconnect. And what I've got behind me is like the wooden slats, and behind that there's like a foam. And if you imagine about trying to stop the sound waves, that will actually trap sound waves. So that's when it will really bring the deadness down. And this is where it might differ from opinion to opinion. But what I'm trying to do is remove all natural acoustics so that I can engineer acoustics if I want them. But it's, again, one of those things where you can't remove acoustics. You can only add it, apart from AI. But,
that's interesting.
That's the thought process here. But yeah.
And then like another bit of advice I hear a lot is to wear earphones so that like the sound from your computer isn't going back into the microphone. But I noticed you're not. So how are you doing that?
So I have.
Is it just like the automatic?
It's compression. So when I'm speaking, the audio will cut from one side to another.
The noise gate is basically switching on and off.
Yeah, but it switches between. It's gating you while I'm speaking, and then it will switch. What's that word?
Oh, okay.
What ones and zeros? What's it called?
Binary.
Binary. It's very binary.
Okay.
So it'll flip between. So from the music industry, I've got very sensitive ears. It's really important to me that people get their podcasts right so that they don't mess with my ears.
Yeah. Well said.
So I really appreciate you giving me an immense amount of time today.
No, that's cool.
So I just kind of have one last question, which is, what kind of podcast are you into?
I've got too many to to even imagine. But I sort of try and cover different topics. Like there's obviously news ones and current affairs. The one that I really like's called the Clean Energy Show. It's like a couple of Canadian guys. They sort of talk about good news in like environmental energy, that sort of world. I think that's one really good. Pod Save the UK. I think that sort of mixes news with humor. It's like Nish Kumar does that.
Oh yeah.
And then there's so I'm quite into getting into sort of founder mindsets and that sort of stuff. So there's Indie Bites, which is done by a guy that I know through, it's like an entrepreneur club. It's called Ramen Club. There's
cool.
So we have like a Slack channel and meetups and pub sessions and stuff to discuss. And he interviews various indie hackers.
Cool.
Yeah. And then there's like a new one kind of got into, which is a guy called David Shapiro, AI Masterclass.
Oh, okay.
That's sort of like it's very much like about, you could see it as quite sensationalist, but it's how AI is going to disrupt everything. He's about post-labor economics. So you'll like once AI has taken all our jobs, what do we do? Like how do we fund society? How do we build things? And like goes into like how new models are evolving and that sort of stuff. So it sort of keeps me abreast of the AI technologies as they're coming out.
Yeah, that's cool.
So that's a few to go on.
Yeah, brilliant. I think I always find myself listening to history ones. I love learning about history. I never really enjoyed history at school, so I listen to a lot of history-based ones. And for me, I always like funny ones. You know, I always like a comedy-based one, even if it's a serious subject. But I don't know if you've ever heard of Time Suck.
No.
Time Suck's a great one. It's very funny. Sometimes they cover pretty dark subjects like the Black Death, but he'll focus on some of the funnier aspects of it, like trying to dance the disease away and how it was used. Yeah, just some silly things, which I really like. The Rest is History is a really good.
Yeah, I've listened to quite a few of those. Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I listen to some Saints ones as well, you know, because to follow the football. In That Number's a brilliant one, which I've been on a couple of times, luckily. And Anna Webb has a great podcast called A Dog's Life.
Yeah, I've heard you on that.
Yeah. and that's brilliant. But yeah, there's some brilliant podcasts out there.
How do you go about like being on those? Do you think that's a good thing to do? Like, what does it bring you, and how do you arrange to do that?
I've never pushed for it. I've never gone out and pushed to be on someone's podcast. It's just been, you know, the first podcast I was ever on was Anna's one, and I was invited to come onto that, myself and a couple of others from Paleo Ridge, and we were on there and we did an episode. I think it went really well, so we were invited back to be on another one at an event, and so we did that, and then we were at another event, and so we did another podcast, and so, you know, I just got invited back. So I thought, well, okay, something must be going right. And then I think because of my appearance on that podcast, a friend of mine, Ray, who runs the In That Number podcast, then invited me on his podcast. And that's where I got the chance to interview James Beattie. But I used to do loads of interviews and videos and stuff for my work. So it wasn't alien to me, just probably preferred being not on video. It suits me a little bit better being just audio, I think. So yeah, it just kind of came about really quite naturally.
I thought it was a really good idea how you suggested to me to do case studies and stuff. Yeah, to grow Audio Audit, because I was thinking, how do I make this as beneficial? So I set it up as just like can we have a video call and like talk through like what's good and what's bad, and there's that helps me develop the product. But then I can turn the transcription into a case study. Then I can release the video on YouTube. I can release it as a podcast, and then keep snipping it up into little chunks that I can then like use in a social media calendar, and just have those little snippets keep coming up in regular interviews. I think it's just going to give so much more content.
There's a couple of things, and I love that approach because that is exactly the right approach to take something, to utilize it, get it out there, and using platforms like Buffer or Hootsuite or something to plan the content is also a really, really good thing. And I think I told you about this before when we spoke before, but Canva is a great platform for just using a template, editing something really quickly, and you could drop the audio in and put some imagery in to get some really good video posts together. So that's
cool.
That's my advice.
Yeah, and then from that that video being on LinkedIn, another guy who I met at the podcast showed last channel with like 10,000 subscribers, and he messaged through it, and he wants to be on the podcast, and so I'm meeting with him next week. Cool. So it's that's awesome. Starting to roll. And I think customers just like to be invited to do something a little bit different and express themselves.
It's a very organic way to grow it, I think. And I really think it's the way to go, for sure.
It's very awkward for me. Like, I've been trying to present this tool as a brand, and I'm having to sort of adjust and be prepared to like show my face and be speaking to camera and that sort of stuff, which is odd for me, but I think it's engaging.
I've seen so many examples though in the past of people who have been behind the scenes, and that's basically what we're saying here. You've been behind the scenes of lots of different things, and so have I. And then you take that kind of leap of faith and you put yourself out there, and I think it's really rewarding. And I think that on the most part, it's only positive. I also think that people are more forgiving than sometimes we give them credit for, and they would rather hear from the expert than hear from the polished presenter. It comes, that presentation side comes after putting yourself out there a lot. Again, like with music, you have to practice. You have to practice performing live. You don't get it first time.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to work on and practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, dude, thank you so much. Yeah, that is so awesome. I'm gonna have fun with the edit.
What the heck is going on?
Oh no, mate, what's up?
I've spent hours on my podcast, and I feel like the podcast platforms are penalizing me for something.
Oh really?
I don't know what to do.
Well,
help me, Obi-Wan.
What?
I mean, help me. Marketing made clear.
It sounds to me like you need to check out Audio Audit. Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Introducing Audio Audit, the ultimate tool for podcasters who demand perfection. With Audio Audit, you get real-time insights and professional quality audits of your podcast episodes. Say goodbye to guesswork and hello to precision. Audio Audit's state-of-the-art technology analyzes your audio, highlights issues, and provides actionable feedback, ensuring your sound is always top-notch.
Nice.
Whether you're a seasoned podcaster or just starting out, Audio Audit is your secret weapon for producing high-quality content that stands out. So why wait? Visit audioaudit.io today and start your free trial. And then, with Marketing Made Clear, you get a cheeky 25% discount on your first year. Just enter MMC on checkout. That's MMC on checkout. Audioaudit.io, where great podcasts begin.
Oh my God, that's good advice.
I'm so chuffed to have got Damian on the podcast, and I really love what he's done with Audio Audit. And like I said, he's definitely not a jack of all trade, master of none. He's an expert. Damo talks about taking things apart until he understands how things work, and I love that mentality. And for me, when it came to websites, about 15 years ago, I identified that my understanding of how websites worked was not where I wanted to be. So I set up a social interest website called witchpet.co.uk, which is no longer running, and I learned so much from putting that site together. Every hurdle, like dealing with hosting, installing a CMS like WordPress, and installing themes, all of which are much easier nowadays, was a seismic leap in my understanding. It led me to later study a foundation in front-end development on Udemy, and shout out to David Molin for his excellent course on there. But I really embraced the HTML and CSS side of the course, and that really made sense to me. JavaScript for me was a lot more tricky, and I kind of lost my way with that, especially when the course went into bootstrap.js and all the more complex kind of code. But Damo is on a whole nother level to this. He's dealing with far more complex coding that I wouldn't even begin to attempt to understand. For me, that process of learning was just like taking something apart to learn the components of how they work together. In this case, a website. But I guess that is the engineer mentality, right? But I think AI is clearly going to change a lot, and to an extent I embrace AI for a lot of things. I use AI for some intros, not all of them. My main intro is a collaboration with a US rapper called Kibo. But right now, in 2024, AI is dominating all these discussions, and I think we can get a little bit sidetracked about getting back to cracking on with some good marketing. If AI helps that process, I'm all for it. Use it, but be aware of its limitations. I saw a random quote that I loved on Instagram that said something like, "I thought AI would come in to do the dishes and washing so that I could spend more time on creative writing and imagery, not to do my creative writing and imagery so I could focus on dishes and washing." There's probably a better quote than that, but you get the picture. And my point was really that AI isn't this brand new thing. To an extent, we've had AI for ages. It's just suddenly become very trendy to talk about. Interesting to hear Damo describe it as an arms race though. It's very competitive, so I guess the reason we're flooded with messaging about AI is that strategically, Google, Microsoft and all the others are looking to solidify themselves as the AI platform. Still though, come on. I love how principled Damo is, and I think that the work he has done with Extinction Rebellion just goes to show that. He's an extremely ethical dude. So like I said, I'm really chuffed to have got him on the pod. I said in the interview that I'll be doing a podcast on sustainability, and that's right, I will be doing one at some point. It's only right because we're talking about both marketing and sustainability. Greenwashing will be a hot topic of conversation. And Damo referred to Felicity, which is of course his better half. And I definitely want to learn more about her app, showing eco-friendly places to live. I think that sounds awesome. So my wife Lucy and I have also gone down the reusable cloth nappy route, but honestly Lucy takes care of it all, and I don't think we'd be able to be as environmentally friendly if it wasn't for the time that she puts into it. It's not easy being green, you know. As parents, you're tired most of the time, and so sometimes convenience does play into this. But if you look at the waste you can save over the years by using cloth nappies, the environmental impact is huge. And yeah, another thing to clarify, I did say it in the intro, I've built a few bass guitars just as a hobby, but they've come out quite well. I built a 6-string bass that is a complete beast, but I'm just not kind of good enough to play a 6-string, so I painted it bright yellow just to make it look pretty. And when I was 18, I made a carbon fibre bass of my dad. It looks cool, but it's horrible to play. And I made a walnut Rickenbacker bass, which is really nice looking, and it plays pretty well, so that's probably my best one so far. Then I made another Rickenbacker out of plywood, more as a test, which is a bit of a horror show when you look at it. Then I started making a jazz bass out of walnut, but I stopped halfway through it about 5 years ago and I haven't restarted it. So I guess that's actually 5 that I've made, give or take. But when we're speaking about the subject of audio quality, it's very difficult to ensure that your podcast will sound good on all episodes. By including so many clips and bits of music in my podcast, I'm running the risk of all sorts of sound issues. But even just a simple backing track, I feel like I'm treading the line between making the track quiet enough to make the narration sound nice and clear, but then I do actually want people to hear it. And Damo talks about the elements of loudness and quietness in the song, so clearly if a platform can offer some sort of insight into whether your podcast will sound okay on all these different devices, that can only be a good thing. And Damo really jogs my memory back to my university days, speaking about frequencies. We learned a lot about sonically building up a picture and placing different instruments into different places in a piece of music. It's kind of why a song sounds empty without a bass guitar, but then you can EQ your guitar to fill more of those bassy frequencies. But if you take a song like All Right Now by Free, the verses don't have any bass in them, so that when the bass kicks in the chorus, you make a real impact. And it's also similar to Song 2 by Blur. The heavy bit of the song is a distorted bass that comes in and it makes it seem full. It's got that full kind of EQ. If you don't know about this, go and have a listen to those 2 songs and you'll know what I mean. In a song, the reason you have a guitar solo is because these notes occupy the same frequency as the voice, so you need to not have the vocals singing at that time. If a guitarist is soloing while the singer is singing, it will sound very messy, just like people talking over each other. But then if a bass player is soloing, it occupies a different frequency altogether. That's why you get bass players like Peter Hook from Joy Division and New Order who kind of solo in a song, but it doesn't interrupt the vocals. I digress again, sorry. But like I said, I wouldn't dream of publishing an episode without putting it through Audio Audit first. and it takes less than 5 minutes to do so it's no-brainer. I think it's really cool that Damo started to put this together through his own experience of audio issues on podcasts and audiobooks. But I think it's just as important that Damo has gone through and looked at all the standards of ACX, Apple and Spotify and other platforms. Talking about metadata as well, this can be something that people overlook. But metadata is the title, description, tags and other functional data within the file, but also within the episode when it's uploaded to Apple, Spotify or whatever platform you're on. So if you don't know about SEO, which is search engine optimization, then basically all you need to understand is that this data is indexed. Or put more simply, that is collected and put into a database within the platform, so that when somebody searches for something, it will be able to pick out the relevant podcasts that meet this search term. But indexing is only part of this challenge. The second part is to actually then perform better than other podcasts so that you come up higher in the search rankings for that term. And people that have some SEO knowledge relevant to search engines, which is where this term came from, will know that all sorts of aspects of web performance come into play with something like the Google algorithm to decide which search results to show first. And obviously things like the number of episodes and listener engagement will be the biggest area of influence on how podcasts are prioritised within the platform. But that's kind of out of your hands. But these other areas of performance are in your hands. Like Nigel Adkins says, control the controllables. So getting the metadata right on an episode is very important. And equally, you need to diversify the metadata on each episode, because if you're using the same information on every podcast, it's not going to look very organic. And that being said, as well, to caveat this, you also want to be making sure that metadata makes sense and works for actual people, not just search engines. I definitely overlooked some of the aspects of adding data into the MP3 file, like metadata, transcription and image, but Damo and Audio Audit really brought this to my attention. Damo mentioned Podscan, and I looked this up. Podscan.fm delivers instant alerts for every podcast mentioned. They use scanning technology that notifies brands the moment a podcast mentions your brand, often within minutes of the release. So my podcast might light up like a Christmas tree because I'm talking about brands all the time. I don't think Damo was as impressed with my knowledge about the earliest use of metadata as I had hoped. But that's okay, hopefully my wonderful listeners will have enjoyed that. Please? But that was a great suggestion from Damo about pasting the transcription into ChatGPT and asking for a summary that can be used for an episode description. Great thinking, Damo. But just again, to recap the checklist that was covered by Audio Audit, it looks at meta tags, cover image, chapters, bitrate, number of channels, sample rate, sample width, loudness, which was a major issue as my average volume was too low on the episode, which would have meant that people would have turned their volume up and then would have got blasted by adverts or other episodes. And then peak volume. This was another issue for me. My episode got a little bit loud in places, so this can distort something called clipping. Then there was noise floor, quiet channel, silence at the beginning, another issue for me. Not enough silence at the start. Audio Audit recommends between 0.5 seconds to a second for initiation. Basically, otherwise the start of the episode might get clipped. Then silence at the end, restarted sentences, profanities and swearing. And I hope you found it as interesting as I did. I also really appreciated the advice that Damo gave to me, like setting up a schedule, concentrating on the artwork, including getting the branding right, and then repurposing content. I know that I do need to jump into making videos and YouTube at some point, but I personally have had to narrow my horizons to focus on the episodes for now. That is the podcast episodes, obviously, I mean. Damo recommended audiograms, and I checked this out and it's really cool. I checked out getaudiogram.com, and you can upload an image and the audio file, and the site adds text over the image to give you a video that you can share. So if you don't have a video, it's probably the next best thing. I checked out Headliner, and that also looks like a really great tool, something that can be really used to promote your podcast. So Damo, I promise I'll give it enough time to succeed, but it's mental that 44% of podcasts will stop within 3 episodes. To me, that's like stopping before you even got started. Realistically, what can anyone's expectations to be after 3 episodes? Full disclosure, I made the decision to record around 10 episodes before releasing anything, including this episode with Damo and all the episodes related to how I started the podcast. This is really because I know that I'm quite time poor and I want to get a decent amount of episodes out before I start drip feeding them. Damo said about Descript and Riverside, and I've had a look at this afterwards, and I have to say it's a really cool platform. And following a little bit of testing, I've even moved the Paleo Ridge podcast onto Riverside, which is awesome. I really do like the platform, and it blew my mind to be able to edit the videos by just editing words like a Word document. And some of the other features that use AI for editing are really cool, and they look like they're going to save me a lot of time in the long run. I'm actually going to edit the Anna Web podcast on there, so make sure you give that a listen and see what you think. When I asked Damo about RSS feeds, it was a bit of a revelation that you can then set up or use Spotify to populate other podcasts or platforms. But I think it's worth saying that in order for your podcast to appear on those sites like Apple Podcast, you need to submit your podcast to each platform. So by that I mean set up the podcast on the platform. Spotify actually offer advice for how to set this up on all the main platforms. I actually didn't go down this route in the end. I used rss.com, and that auto-populates all these different podcast platforms. I did have to do a little bit of setup for stuff like Apple Podcast, but a lot of other podcasts, they just automatically worked. So that was really cool, and I definitely recommend the rss.com platform. Damo says he uses AntennaePod, and it uses Apple's API. So if you don't know what an API is, an API or application programming interface is a set of rules or protocols that enables software applications to communicate with each other and exchange data, features and functionality. And in this case it means that AntennaePod is feeding off Apple's data. Like Damo says, podcastindex.org indexes all podcasts, and it offers some interesting stats. At the beginning of my recording in June 2024, it had indexed 4.2 million podcasts. And in the last 3 days, when I'd looked at it, 109,000 podcasts had been published. Damo suggested setting up a Patreon for people to be able to support the pod, and if that's something you'd consider, please do give me a shout. It might mean that I don't go down the route of advertising if at all possible, but the long-term goal is for the podcast to be at least self-sufficient financially. I checked out Buzzsprout, the site that Damo mentioned, and it looks really good. It works as the central point to create your RSS, and then it lists your podcast in a bunch of different places, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Alexa, Overcast, Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Castro, Castbox, and Podchaser. It then combines all your statistics into one dashboard. You pay for the platform based on how many hours of content you upload per month. And this is very, very similar to rss.com, so it's kind of either or, you'd use one or the other. They also offer a customizable website for your podcast, as well as transcripts, a further mastering tool, and then something they call visual soundbites, which create video clips from your podcast that you can publish on social media. So I don't actually need that because I'm using Riverside, which does that for me. They also offer a tool to advertise your podcast to help get more listeners, which is also very cool though. Damo mentioned Audacity, which is also the platform that Ray uses to edit In That Number. And like I said, you get GarageBand for free on any Apple computer, which is the platform that Steve Jobs showed off podcasting on all those years ago. And if you then want to level up your DAW, you can purchase Logic Pro, and all your GarageBand files will work on that platform. That will be the plan for me long term. I had a look at Reaper at reaper.fm, and that did look really good. It kind of reminded me of the layout of Pro Tools. And just finally, I treated my home studio so that I can record easily with my condenser mic. I just bought the traditional soundproofing foam and put speakers on foam wedges. I then put up some audio paneling behind me, which is like wooden slats with a felt background, and it traps echo. What this means is that when I record like I'm doing right now, the recording is very dry, and by that I mean it doesn't have any kind of natural reverb or ambience from the room, so that I can control that in editing. So if I give you a quick demo, I've created a separate track with absolutely no compression or reverb or gate or anything on it, and that's what you're hearing right now. And then I've switched back to the audio of my standard settings, which includes compression, reverb and some channel EQ. And yeah, so that's the difference. For me, it sounds so much better to take that kind of raw recording and make it better. But anyway, massive thank you for Damo to join me on the podcast. I really do appreciate it, and Damo's been a big champion for me. He's really helped me. So I also did a little advert for him, which you heard just after the recording. I hope you like that. You'll hear that on a couple of other episodes. It's just a bit of a thank you from me to Damo for helping me out. And I'll leave you with the lovely theme song just one more time.